This is a railroad crossing located in Tarboro, North Carolina, a town I grew up in when I was a kid. It's one of many railroad crossings I'm going to be modeling in this area. Now, you'll notice in this video that even the cars that make left turns at this intersection are programmed. Before I test the railroad crossing, I'm going to test all the cars to make sure they cross the intersection correctly and to make sure they're doing what the traffic light is telling them to do. Observant viewers will notice that the rail crossing this is based on does not have any gates on it. However, I could not find any cantilevers that were long enough to span over 3 lanes of traffic and had 3 sets of lights on them, except for this one, which has a gate, so there wasn't really much I could do about that. I had no choice but to use this one. All the other ones weren't long enough to span all 3 lanes. In case you're wondering, the cars do not go this fast in real life. And here's the other side of the crossing. You'll notice that this one only has 2 sets of lights and does not span over the far left lane. That's because the left turn lane on this side of the intersection does not cross the tracks, so there's no reason for it to alert cars that a train is coming on that track. It's completely unaffected by it. Well, you might be wondering by now, why would I want to recreate the town of Tarboro, North Carolina in this game? As it turns out, this is a very great rail fanning location because this town is filled with railroad crossings. And the best part is, none of them are quiet zones, so the train will blow its horn at all of them. This particular area of the town is located in an area where the railroad runs in the middle of a divided highway. At this particular intersection, it leaves the highway. I actually used to live down the street from this particular crossing. I don't remember exactly where my old address was though. Here you can see the 3rd cantilever sign. I'm not quite sure why it's so far away from the edge of the intersection. In fact, that used to always puzzle me as a child. You would think it would make more sense for them to be a little bit closer to where the crossing actually is located. I'm guessing they had to make sure you could see the traffic light. Anyway, here's another one of those crossings. As you can see, a lot of the crossings in this area have no left turn train signs. These are signs that pretty much they just light up and display the words "No left turn train" when a train is approaching. Just to remind you that you can't turn left right now. And here's another one. I think my aunt might live near this crossing, but I don't quite remember. It's been so long since we've been here. And here we have another railroad crossing. Again, it has no left turn train signs. You can see a guy crossing the street. A lot of these railroad crossings are equipped with mechanical bells. Here's another major intersection, pretty much like the one at the end of the divided highway. Like that one, this one also has no gates to block the road, like most railroad crossings in North Carolina. And this one also has a no left turn train sign. Most of the traffic lights in North Carolina hang on wires. That's actually pretty rare in the area that I currently live in because they pretty much find that to be ugly, so they put them on poles instead. In fact, the city actually spent some money taking some traffic lights off of wires and putting them on black poles so that they could look more stylish. I can't imagine anything like that would ever happen in North Carolina. Now, I've noticed a lot of the crossings in these pictures have e-bells on them. I think they all had mechanical bells when I was a kid, so I'm guessing some of them have been upgraded since then. This side of the intersection does not have a no left turn train sign. Instead, it has a left turn arrow. There's a bracket on that pole that suggests that a no left turn train sign might have existed in the past but was removed. The same thing's for the other side of the intersection. And here we have the last crossing on this divided highway. After this, the train leaves the town and continues traveling parallel to the road. When I was a kid, me and my father used to chase freight trains as they traveled parallel to the roads in this area. As we heard the horn of the train blowing its horn traveling down the divided highway, we get in the car and prepare to follow it. Most of the trains would travel in this direction, and we travel on that road that you see running parallel to the tracks until it got to a point where the road crossed the tracks and was no longer running parallel to it. I remember this railroad crossing. if I remember correctly, it used to have lights, gates, and bells, but it was so long ago. It probably never had those, and I'm just thinking they did. If they did, though, they've definitely removed them since then. As you see, there's nothing but a yield sign and an RXR sign there. You know, I never really thought about it until just now, but what are some of these buildings that are here? Thermwell Products Company. There's not really much description on it. It has a few reviews. 2 reviews. I'm guessing these reviews are from people who have worked there. Sadly, they're just star ratings. No one actually comments on what they thought about the building. Sponge X LLC. This one has a 5-star review, but not much info on why they gave it a 5-star. And you can see an abandoned section of track there. At this railroad crossing, the road is no longer going parallel to the railroad. So here we would just stop and watch the train cross the railroad crossing and disappear into the distance. I think I remember this railroad crossing used to have a weird glitch where the lights would turn off before the gates started going up, and then when the gates were halfway up, the lights would come back on again. If it did have that glitch, they probably fixed it by now. There's one night I will never forget because it was the one night we were following the train and it was traveling in the opposite direction. Much to our surprise, because they usually traveled in only one direction. So, we waited till it got to the end of this divided highway and continued to follow it until we couldn't follow it any further. So, at this point we were traveling down this road that runs parallel to the railroad, and we just kept going until it got to a point where the road crossed the tracks. This path was actually a lot longer than the path I showed you earlier, because it takes a lot longer for this one to actually cross the tracks. Hey, look at that, Rock Church. We used to go there when we lived in Tarboro. My parents actually told me that when they joined this church, a few people actually left because they didn't want to be in the same church as a black family, which was kind of, racist. But, some people are like that. Anyway, on Wednesdays, they used to have this thing where they had like a huge dinner and fellowship, but apparently they stopped doing that because people were getting too fat. It actually has 1 5-star rating apparently. Anyway, continuing the journey, traveling down this alternate US highway. Man, there's a lot of railroad crossings in this town. Here the road separates from the tracks a little bit, but we didn't give up and kept going. Eventually it turned and curved back toward the tracks again. And here is where we stopped, in an area where the track crossed the road diagonally and disappeared into the distance. I don't remember if this crossing had gates back then. I think all I remember is it having lights and a bell that rang continuously until the train finished crossing, but it was probably upgraded since then and has gates now, if it didn't before. I also noticed that the road pavement is painted over the tracks, which is weird because usually the road is completely unpainted where it crosses the tracks. I really miss Tarboro, North Carolina. It's the only town I've lived in that had quite this many railroad crossings. You couldn't drive too far without finding one. But to be fair, I do live near a bunch of towns that do have a lot of railroad crossings, like Allentown and Emmaus, Pennsylvania. There's a lot of railroad crossings in those two towns. Also, I've noticed this crossing has an E-bell. I think it had a mechanical bell in 1999, but I could be wrong. I don't remember that much about being a child, except this and visiting the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse. Now, I remember this railroad crossing specifically because it was at this railroad crossing that while my mother was driving me somewhere, she got cut off by a truck driver that was making a right turn at this intersection. And I actually remember this day pretty well. I do not think he actually checked to make sure it was safe before pulling into traffic. I remember thinking to myself, I wonder what it's like being a truck driver. Apparently you can cut people off and get away with it. On a side note, on my top 48 favorite states to drive in as a truck driver, North Carolina is number 1. And here's why. One day when I was driving a truck in North Carolina, I noticed how polite the other drivers are. For example, I was driving on I-85 and I was about to put my left turn signal on to get into the left lane. And I'm thinking to myself, oh boy, I guess I gotta make a lane change again. I guess it's time to turn on the turn signal and then drive for 5 miles as I struggled wrestling against other cars trying to get into the left lane because they refused to let me in the left lane for whatever reason. Time for another one of those stupid lane changes again. But then, much to my surprise, when I turned the left turn signal on, the people in the left lane actually got out of the way so I could merge. And I thought to myself, amazing! In North Carolina, when you turn your turn signal on, people actually listen to it. Because, you know, in any other state in this country, when a truck driver turns their turn signal on, people just ignore it, and then just to get on my nerves, I believe. Like, I can't think of any other reason why they do this other than to get on the truck driver's nerves. They just drive right between the truck and the lane they're trying to merge into. Like, what are they trying to do? Just prevent you from merging or something? Anyway, so yeah, since that pretty much doesn't happen in North Carolina, North Carolina was always my favorite state to drive in. The people there are always polite on the road, it seems. Now, number 48 on that list would obviously be Texas. Texas was my least favorite state to drive in as a truck driver because one time when I was making a lane change from the left lane to the right lane, this guy that was in the right lane, he was already behind me. He was already going slower than me. And he was like, oh no, a truck's about to merge into the lane that I'm in. I don't want to be behind him, even though I'm already going slower than him. For some arbitrary reason, it irks me to have a truck in front of me, so I'm going to slam on the accelerator. And he did that and slammed right into the back of the trailer. I have no idea what he was trying to accomplish. And then he tried to get me to pull over so we could exchange insurance, but then he gave up and then just drove off. I still don't know what was wrong with that guy.